So in this video, I'm going to try to find some information. It was suggested that the 2021 Kia Telluride SUV that Ryan Hinton was sitting in when the police had surrounded his car that ultimately led in his, was that car actually stolen or not? The media is just repeating what the police chief had said. And so the police chief had said that it was a stolen car investigation. And they later on did say something about it being, it's just kind of being repeated that they were sitting in a stolen car. So I'll just mention this one part because that is pretty damning. You're sitting in a stolen car. Did you just go out there and just corner, dude and just take his damn car? That's, grand theft auto. That's not just like a small property crime. That's like a major property crime. You're stealing like a little, penny candy or whatever. You're not just stealing a little pencil. You took a vehicle. And maybe if they're middle class, maybe they got 5 cars or something. But if they're poor, then they might have took, one of their best vehicles that they had, and now they have to deal with all this bullshit. And then there's the residual effects of, grand theft auto. And so it's not conclusive. I cannot tell. I only read a couple articles, but I cannot tell if the 2021 Kia Telluride was actually, the alternative claim. It wasn't just a, stick 'em up kind of stole in the back of an alley kind of deal, but somebody had said that it was some sort of repossession case, some sort of, the owner was sitting in the car with them, and the owner was sitting in the car, and then it was being repossessed. So the guy just didn't make all the payments on it, or had, didn't make a couple payments on it, or that either the owner was sitting in the car or that a relative of the owner was sitting in the car. Well, that's different then, isn't it? That's not the exact same as stealing a car. It's not like you went after a dude who had a car, who's got to take, his kids to work, he's got to pick up his wife, he's got to bring some groceries home, or maybe he's, a mailman and he relies on his car for work, the entire thing. So it wasn't like you just injured another person in order to steal the car. The dealership, you flaked out a couple payments, and so now the dealership is coming after you. And so that's different. It's not like they went to Northern Kentucky, stole a car, and then they were just sitting in a stolen car, just like, hanging out and smoking. They didn't even say they found any drugs or anything. So I want to know the truth. I want to know all the details that could, all the news that's fit to print. So I want to know all the details about this Ryan Hinton case. He is running away. It does seem weird. You show up to a vehicle, 4 guys get out of the vehicle and just start running. One of them has a gun, and as he's running, he's got the gun in his hand. He gets shot in the side. That seems suspicious. But when it comes to the 2021 Kia Telluride from Northern Kentucky, was it stolen? I'm not for sure. I'm not for sure if it was stolen by, violently stolen, we'll say. I don't know if it was violently stolen or if it's more like corporate crime, right? Just some sort of paperwork, the repossess order. And how quick did the repossess order? Did they just miss a payment? It was the day after for repossession. Did they try to call the person? Did they try to work a deal out? And then there is also a suggestion, because we don't know who the police officer was that shot and killed Ryan Hinton. Was it Cian McGrath? Cian McGrath. Somebody had claimed that it was this Cian McGrath. And this Cian McGrath has a horrible record. He's 42 years old, and he's got a terrible record. But it doesn't look like it's this Cian McGrath. They had just said that if you look at the tattoo on the inside of his right arm, and then you see a tattoo of this Cian McGrath, they said it's the same. It didn't look the same to me. They do have tattoos, but it didn't look like it was the same tattoo. It looked different. So let's just kind of go through. There's a grand jury indictment, so that's interesting, right? You do some major crime, then you get a grand jury to indict you. That's how you can cover your probable cause. You could do an evidentiary hearing, a preliminary hearing, or you could get a grand jury indictment. The Fifth Amendment says any capital or infamous cases require a grand jury indictment. Monday morning, the 3 people, they had originally faced 1 count of receiving stolen property, and 1 count of felony obstruction of felony business. Receiving stolen property, that's not a violent, grand theft auto, receiving stolen property. So maybe somebody else stole it and they sold it to them. I need to know what this original crime was that they were actually going after the guys, because if you're in a car and you're hanging out with your homeboys, you're allowed to have a weapon on you. It should be holstered. That's, if you pull it out, then it could be lethal intent. So if you just got a gun in your hand, then they could try to say that's lethal intent. The grand jury indictments are 2 counts of obstructing official business, 2 counts of theft, 2 counts of receiving stolen property, 1 count of improperly handling a gun in a vehicle, and 1 count of having weapons under disability. That's some weird charges. Those charges does not make it seem like that they went to, the interstate, or they went to some sort of intersection, pointed a gun at somebody who was driving a vehicle, made him get out of the car, get in the car, and then they drove off. That doesn't sound like it was a violent grand theft auto type of deal. That matters, because if it's a repossession thing, so therefore the guy who's in the driver's seat, he didn't make a payment on the vehicle. Who knows what they were doing, what they were talking about? Why were they congregating together in the back end of this apartment complex? All those things seem very suspicious, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Ryan Hinton was involved in a crime. And also, they never say whether or not the people are like part of a gang. It matters if you're part of a gang or not, because that tells you a motive, that tells you a bunch of things. So it's weird that somehow never comes out. So since Rodney Hinton Jr., they're pushing this thing, trying to get him the capital punishment, trying to get him the death penalty, and then they're doing the perp walk with 50 different cops. They're the ones exploding this case. They're making this case so huge. With the 24/7 news cycle, this thing could have happened, and then they just played it quietly, and then it gets buried, and then another thing happens, and now people are talking about something else. Instead, they're making this thing stick out like a sore thumb, because it's terrible when somebody gets murdered, but for the police, when a police officer dies, it's almost like it's one of the best human beings ever that's died, right? They get like a huge parade, they get a bunch of honors, 12-gun salute. When people are getting shot in the streets all across America, at any given day, 50 people are being shot and murdered every day in America. There's 50 people that get shot and killed. At least 50 people get shot and killed. And then the cops kill 3,000 people, 3,000 Americans every year, which is kind of remarkable when you think that there's 340 million Americans, and then that we're a free country, free society, so you'd have a lot of challenges. 3,000 doesn't seem like it's that much, but Bell is charged with having a weapon while under disability, previously convicted of drug abuse, drug possession. What kind of drugs? Marijuana? Isn't marijuana legal in Ohio now? So I found some things. Let's just talk about this Cian McGrath. Cian McGrath does not sound like a good person at all. Let's see. Officer shot man reaching for the gun. Cian McGrath was around when that happened, but it wasn't him. He's going to be put on administrative leave after the shooting, and they're going to be on leave for 7 days. But it said that there was another guy that actually did the shooting. Harris suffered a minor grazing wound to the hip, transported to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. He was later released into police custody. They found a baggie of heroin in Harris's pants pockets. This is from an article, Cincinnati.com, from 2015. So it was suggested that it was Cian McGrath, and the fact that Cian McGrath, his name has appeared in articles from before, it's just a bit of a red flag. I don't think that it's Cian McGrath, though. It didn't look, the tattoo did not look like it was the same one, because you could see in the body camera, you could see the tattoo from the inside of his bicep, and then they had seen a picture from Cian McGrath in a different one. They said, see the tattoo? That's the same one. It didn't look like the same tattoo to me. Brian Trotta. Brian Trotta had shot Jarvis Harris. And so Cian McGrath just happened to be on the scene, was there at the time. 2015, that happened 10 years ago. Now, here's something interesting. This is WSWS.org. May 8th, 2025. Prosecutor seeks death penalty in case of Cincinnati father accused of killing deputy one day after police shot and killed his son. Here is, in February 2023, the Cincinnati Police Department released findings from an internal investigation that accused Officer McGrath and several others of excessive force, improper search and discourtesy. Improper search and discourtesy. You were not courteous. The allegation that Cian McGrath was discourteous during an incident in which he and other officers assaulted a man with a prosthetic eye while serving a search warrant was sustained. Fantastic. That's fantastic, and that's fantastical. That's crazy. After arresting the man who was staying in an apartment with his daughter and grandchildren, Cian McGrath threatened the remaining family members, "We'll work on getting you put out on the street, all right? Next time, answer the door for the fucking police." The report noted that Officer McGrath did not need to add to the trauma and stress of the situation by using profane language, especially in the presence of children who are already in tears over the incident. That's true. That's true. That's unnecessary. We'll work on getting you put out on the street. If you keep running your mouth, okay, we just took your father away from you, and now we're going to evict you, and you're going to be living in a damn dumpster before I'm finished with you. So far this year, there's been 6 officer-involved shootings in the greater Cincinnati area. I mean, it's been 5 months so far. So the police shooting of young Ryan Hinton, followed by the killing of Deputy Henderson by Hinton's father, is a tragic situation and a damning indictment of the entire capitalist system. The police, an instrument of class rule, are virtually untouchable and unaccountable in capitalist America. That is true. You have 3 ways that you could actually go after police officers. You could either try to push for criminal charges, you could get internal investigations, or you could sue them through a 1983 civil rights claim in federal court. And when you think about those 3 options, you have to push the prosecutor to arrest a police officer. They're not going to do that unless it's obvious, there's a videotape, there's a public outrage, uproar. They're not going to do that because the prosecutors are dependent upon the cops in order to bring them cases, and then they're also dependent on the cops to testify for the cases that they bring them. Prosecutors should actually just have an intake process where they accept not just cases from the police, but cases from the general public as well. That would be a lot better and a lot smarter for prosecutors to do things that way. Instead of waiting for cops to kidnap a body, and then when you have the body, then just ream the body. Why don't you look for the crimes? Why don't you look for the criminals who commit the crimes, whether the cop brings them in or whether a civilian or a citizen, in order to make a citizen's arrest, even if it's lawful to do, it's such an impossible situation. You got to, go after the person, arrest the person, and then when you bring them in, then you have to basically have the investigation, the police, the documents, the videotape, the photos, the witnesses. You'll have to have all that stuff in line, ready to back up that you just kidnapped this person, because if you don't and you can't prove it to him, it looks like you just assaulted a guy, threw him over your back, and then went into the police station. Well, that seems like that's assault and kidnapping, right? That's assault, kidnapping, unlawful detention, imprisonment, false imprisonment, who knows? So that's just the thing that they said about Cian McGrath there. And here I'm looking at this picture. This is Friends of Bones and from X.com. It was just posted on this website that the guy is just saying that, hey, I figured it out for you. But I'm looking at the damn video, and he's got it looks like a little stick in like a circle. Some kind of circle that's on, Cian McGrath's arm. And then whereas I see the arm of the body camera, it looks like more like a plane, like an airplane. Maybe I'll have to do a screenshot or some shit. But it doesn't look like it's Cian McGrath. But still, who is it? Who is it? If you don't tell us who the police officer is, then we're just left to speculate. They said that they use Marsy's Law, which, protects the victims from their names being disclosed because of harassment or something. But until there's a conviction, the guy is innocent until proven guilty. It's just the alleged victim and the alleged perpetrator until you have the conviction. And you'd like to think a conviction is right, but if you actually read Framed, there's this incredible book that, just kind of shows how America's judicial system just kind of messes up over and over again. This book called Framed, John Grisham. It's an incredible book, incredible book. There's just so many things in the book. You had the Norfolk Four. The Norfolk Four, I didn't know false confessions was a thing. So the Norfolk Four, they essentially just come up with a cocky, manny story, and then they get 4 Navy sailors, Caucasians. So the criminal justice system isn't just, hurting people of color, it's hurting Caucasians. It's kind of hurting everybody across the board. In the Norfolk 4 case, they picked on some Navy people. Some guy's wife had got murdered, brutally murdered. And eventually, I want to say Omar Bradley, I don't know, some guy admits to it, confesses to it. But the cops had arrested 4 guys. They were all part of the Navy. I want to say maybe one was a part of the Navy. I don't know. But they had like exemplary records. And they just harass them all night. They just harass them all night. They're just interrogating them, putting pressure on them, torturing them. They're lying. They said they took the lie detector test. They failed the lie detector test. They're also saying that we have an eyewitness that saw you there on the scene. And so they're just using all these insane tactics in order to force the confession out of the person. And then sometimes, they'll be all night. They'll sit there and interrogate the guy all night. And then they'll even offer something stupid like, we'll let you go home. We'll let you go home if you just say what we want to hear. And so what that sounds like when you get into a court that the person confessed, well, then you don't have to do any investigation. You don't need any evidence whatsoever. The guy confessed. Why would he confess to something he didn't even do? So to a jury that's uneducated or, doesn't know about psychology, social psychology, the way authority can, bend the will of their victims. I didn't know forced confessions was actually a thing. And what was crazy about the Norfolk 4 was the guy was saying that he was doing the most heinous shit ever. They were sitting there saying that the guy admitted to gangbanging this other guy's wife, and that all the other 3 guys, who they just kind of picked 3 sort of random people, that they all were there. So he's saying all this crazy shit that didn't happen. And the other 3 guys are like, why is he saying all this stuff? And it's like, yeah, I kind of knew him, but we weren't friends or anything. It's like they would find one guy would say another guy's name, and then that person would get arrested, and then they would come in. And so when one of the guys who was, being wrongfully accused and then later on convicted, they were real pissed off at, I want to find the guy's name, but they were real pissed off at the guy that was sitting there saying that they all gangbanged this guy's wife and then they shot her in the head or some shit, because why would you just make up some shit like that? That's crazy. But then if you actually look at the case, the guy seems very weak-willed. He doesn't have, a good backbone, a good spinal cord. He's being coerced, interrogated all night, tortured essentially. Then when his attorney gets a hold of the case, he just had a client that got executed on death row, so the shittiest attorney ever. Well, what do you think the shittiest attorney was going to do for this, Norfolk 4 guy? He was going to try to save him from getting death row, and so he was just saying, comply with the police, cooperate with the police, and then maybe you'll get life in prison. And that was the deal that he had offered to him because, well, they got you, right? The criminal justice system works. They've already arrested you. You was there. You've already admitted it. You signed the confession. It's done for you. So what I want you to do is go into court and then keep the lie going, testify to the lie that you had gang raped the man's wife, and then that you put the gun to the guy's head. And then he was like real detailed about how they had done the gang rape too. So because of this book, Framed, there's a lot of different examples. There was Joe Bryan. Joe Bryan was a good Christian family man, principal of a school. He was 2 hours away when his wife got killed. He's going to serve 30-something years in jail. There's another guy where he loses his 3 kids to an accidental fire. They executed him in 2004. Todd something. Cameron Todd Willoughby. I just talked about him just a second ago. Cameron Todd Willingham. So Cameron Todd Willingham, he said that he's going to sit upon the throne of the earth now. From dust to dust. Those were his final words before he cussed out his ex-wife. So I didn't see anything. I'm looking at this guy's tattoo, and it just, his arm looks different than this other tattoo. He does have tattoos, which, why do police officers are supposed to have like just almost near perfect records. Why are so many cops like, look like they've been part of like some sort of biker gang with all the tattoos that they got? I don't know. I guess I just was born in '82, but it's like, remember the good old days when police officers, were nice, clean cut, had high and tight haircuts, dressed real nice, no piercings, no tattoos, so there was no, they're above reproach. There was no reason for you to doubt any of their. Here's I don't know, tip411.com. They mentioned that James Bell and Cian McGrath were on routine patrol in Westwood. They encountered a vehicle with a stolen license plate on it, and then they recovered some guns, a Smith & Wesson 22A1 pistol and a Ruger SR-22 pistol. And then one of the weapons proved to be a match for a weapon used in the murder of a James Tamplin in 5676 Winnesta Avenue. So actually, Cian McGrath was part of getting this murder weapon. So this is actually, they said June 6, 2016 when that had happened. So that's interesting. They arrested Corin Smith and Devaria Riggins. And it was James Bell, officers James Bell and Cian McGrath. And then here's this guy kind of asserting that the police officer was Cian McGrath. And he said that he caused a near-fatal 2020 crash that permanently disabled an innocent bystander, Travis Feltner, by recklessly violating CPD high-speed pursuit policy in rush hour gridlock. So that's another, basically this Cian McGrath was that he's two and one, two bad stories, one good story, and then the link actually doesn't go to anything that backs that story up, but they were just saying that he was a part of some kind of accident. He's pursuing a high-speed chase, and then he hits a bystander and doesn't kill him, near fatal crash, but permanently disables him. So Cian McGrath, he's the shooter. I don't think Cian McGrath is a shooter. But they are playing this thing like mafia. They're playing this thing like mafia. When Michael Corleone shot the police chief, and then Salazzo, when Salazzo and the corrupt, dirty cop got it, he goes to Italy because you got to lie low, right? Once you do something like that. And so they're using Marcy's law, which is supposed to protect the victims. He's not a victim. He wasn't injured. It was like, well, he injured me because of the emotional distress that I had to go through because I was forced to shoot. You weren't forced to shoot him. You didn't have to shoot him. It was a dangerous situation. I'll give him that. It was a dangerous situation, and he could have just kind of 1 second away from being shot if the guy would have turned to him. But the guy's running away. And there is a Supreme Court case that says if they're running away, you're not allowed to shoot the person unless you believe that there was some sort of harm to the general public. He was going to harm himself or harm somebody else. Harm you, harm somebody else. If you weren't defending you or defending yourself. And I want to say that the Supreme Court case was the guy jumped into a car and then drove away. But he wasn't backing into anybody. So because he was able to, cleanly drive away. So you're not allowed to shoot a fleeing felon in the back if they're running away from you because you don't want to give chase. And you're not allowed, if there's no danger to you, if he's running away, no gun in his hand, and let's say, I don't even know what kind of felony, like a non-violent felony. He had an ounce of weed on him. That's not a felony anymore in Ohio, but you can't just shoot a guy that's got heroin in his pocket who's running away from you, who's not threatening you, threatening anybody, just running away from you. If someone gets in a car that could be threatening to other people because that's a weapon. So there is a Supreme Court case that's out there that says that you can't just shoot a person, a fleeing felon in the back. You can't just shoot him in the back. So inconclusive. I don't know if the 2021 Kia Telluride SUV that they said Ryan Hinton had helped to steal was actually stolen the way that you would think that a car is being stolen. So I don't know why they're saying this car is stolen. I don't know what evidence is being provided, and we, the public, need to know this information. I'll mention this other thing too. Some things just seem so outlandish. Somebody had come forward, and so you got a witness testimony, which it's kind of incredible that somebody would put themselves out there like that. But Rodney Hinton Jr. is the father. Ryan Hinton is the son. And he's going to run over to the Mr. Police Officer, man. I forget the guy's name. But she had come forward and said that she was an eyewitness to the thing. And it looked like Rodney Hinton Jr. was actually on the passenger side. It looked like he was passed out. It looks like he was sleeping, and that a female was actually driving the car that hit the police officer. That just sounded so fantastical. That just sounded so ludicrous and outrageous. It's like, there's no way that's the case. That doesn't sound right. Does that sound right to you? That don't sound right to me. So, yeah, inconclusive. I don't know how the car was stolen, if he was part of the stealing, if he had anything to do with the stealing. I don't know why they were sitting in a car, them running away, them sitting in the back end of a parking lot of an apartment complex, him having a gun in his hand. They all ran away when the cops came and wolf-packed them. All that sounds suspicious, but what was the guy's crime? What was Ryan Hinton's crime? You know? I would like for that to be more conclusive than what it is now.